Now we're going to look at building the truss unit elements, and that's an adaptive component, and I'll show you how we get to that. We're going to go ahead and open up a new family. And I'm sorry. A new family. We're going to open up a new family, not a file, and we're going to go down to generic model pattern based. When we select on that, we'll notice that we get this icon or this preview with these black dots. Those are the adaptive points of the pattern based system, and you'll notice how the blue grid matches or is similar to our divisions of our blue grid here. So we're going to open that up, and we're going to save that right away. So I'm going to call it frame. And as a brief introduction, so with adaptive geometry, all of these points are numbered. They're numbered 1 through 4, and they are automatically coordinated when you place them in a pattern system to attach themselves to the node of the grid that we've created, to the nodes. And if you grab any one of these points, you can actually move them. Actually, I don't know why we're not getting an indicator allowing us to move that. I guess we don't get arrows, so that's a little deceiving. If I just grab one of these points and slide it, it'll move in three-dimensional space, but it doesn't actually give you the indicator, so excuse my confusion there. So a space frame is a two-dimensional object. We are really in a planar surface here. One of the first things I guess I can show that would maybe help clear this up is if I grab this define geometry and I go right away and say create a solid form, and I'll leave it just extruding it out like that. We've given this file a name now. What I want to do is I'm going to load that into the project that we've already created, that space frame, just to show you how this system works, give you a general idea. So I'm going to click over to a view of this, and I'm going to select we've loaded that frame now into this file, and I'm going to go down and select the frame which has been loaded in, and that's going to apply that to the pattern system. And you'll notice we're going to go through a regeneration time, and now we've applied that panel system to our surface. And you can see how the adaptive geometry locks in the points on the surface, but then the extrusion goes out and it's not connected to anything geometrically. So we'll kind of address that issue a little bit later on about what's going on here by the way we actually create adaptive geometry. But this gives you an idea of just the flow. We've actually, if I now tab in here, I can select a single element. Let me try to do that again. There, that's now listed as the frame. And I can go back and edit that just by hitting Edit Family. So right away I'm going to just undo this. And now we're going to go through the idea of creating adaptive points above that to create a three-dimensional space frame. So this technique is so common, you'll see hundreds of YouTube's videos describing how to do this, but we're going to insert a bunch of adaptive points, second tier of adaptive points that will behave exactly like the first points that we put in. And let me just demonstrate by actually putting one in. I'm going to identify that adaptive point by going set the reference plane. I'll do that one more time. Go in and click. Then I'm going to grab an adaptive point and I'm going to place it here. And now if I actually come back in and touch that point, I can actually offset it. And I'll go ahead to make it clear. I'm going to make it at least 1 foot offset. So it's going to bounce up. Now you can see it sitting above the construction plane. And now what happens is if I move my adaptive point, you'll notice my main adaptive point, my numbered one, the second one that I've created will move along with it. So they're coordinated with each other. So bear with me in a minute, and we're going to do that to the other 3 points. And you can do that relatively quickly. Actually, I'm going to do it completely again. I'm going to just go ahead and delete this. And I'm going to go through the process of putting in 4 adaptive points. So I'm going to go ahead and set a work plane, place a point, set a work plane, place a point, set a work plane, place a point, set a work plane, and place a point. So now I have a whole bunch of items all overlapping each other, and the quickest way to sort out those is to just grab them all and use the filter tool to grab just the points that we want. So the adaptive points we don't want any longer, or we don't want to use them in this idea of offsetting them. And we don't need our reference lines. All we need are the reference points. So I'm just going to use those. And now I'm going to have 4 reference points. You can't tell that they're highlighted, but if you look over in the properties palette, you'll see that there's 4 reference points. And I can go ahead and offset those. And actually, let's make it a little more obvious. I'm going to offset these by 3 feet. So now we have these adaptive reference points. We can check their behavior by just moving our elements and seeing what happens to these adaptive points. And this is just a very common thing to do, just to make sure that you haven't established a point that will not behave adaptively. And now we're going to go ahead and build some componentry. The first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to use reference lines, and I'm going to connect some of our geometry. We're going to make sure that 3D snapping is turned on, and I'm going to go ahead and go from point to point. And I've created now some reference lines that are up higher, and you'll notice that if I move these, the reference lines will move with them, so they're behaving adaptively. So I'll undo that. And we're going to go ahead and make a tubular extrusion around that assembly. Actually, I'm going to put in a couple of more lines just so we have some indications for other things we want to construct. So I'm going to make a few more reference lines. I'm going to put a point in the center of this line. It's going to be important for our construction of, and you'll notice when it turns to a triangle, we have a midpoint there. I'll go ahead and make another reference line in the other direction. And we go ahead and check, grab our reference point, move it, and see if we have adaptive behavior. Actually, I just pointed out a problem with this adaptive point. So I'm going to delete the way I did these diagonals here. And I'm going to go ahead and put in an adaptive geometry transverse to that. Let's put some points on this line. And I'll put another line through. And then I'll put a point in the center there. And that line is black right now. It's because I didn't choose reference. And if you do that, you can just easily switch it back to a green reference line by clicking on it. Now you have a green reference line. And once again, just checking to see if we have adaptive behavior. Now that point is moving, and that's going to be a connection for the bottom of our truss. We'll see that shortly. Okay, so let's put a tube around this whole thing. The easiest way to do that is actually to put a point on this line, and then use our circle tool. And I'm just going to come in here and I've got to select a plane to construct on. So first thing I'm going to do is make sure I select that construction plane, and then I'm going to come back in and grab that point, and I'm going to draw a circle. 2 inches, that means the tubing will be 4 inches in diameter. And then this is probably one of the nicest, most powerful features of creating surfaces. I'm going to grab that, and I'm going to hold the control down and grab the reference geometry around it and go ahead and create a form, and it's going to give us a rectangular grid. So I'll save this just as good practice. I'm going to load this back into the project, and I'm going to overwrite the existing version. And there we have our space frame. And one of the things that's going on right now is that our space frame is down below our surface. If we select on that, we should get a chance to be able to flip the components. So I have selected the surface, and I'm going to go component flip and apply that. And now that grid, instead of being below the form, should pop up above the form. And there we have it now up above in the geometry. I'm going to end this clip so that we can divide off these tasks, and I'll come back and we'll finish off creating the truss bottom components.